This is video 2 of 5.5, performing function operations. This time, we're going to perform these operations of multiplying and dividing two functions. So if I start with number 3, we're first going to multiply the two functions together, and then we're going to divide. And then we state the domain and evaluate for the given number or given value of x. So it gives us function f, gives us function g, and gives us x equals 9. Alright, so let's first find f times g of x. Okay, so I'm going to take x squared and I'm going to multiply it times square root of x. Okay, so this is the same thing as saying x squared times x to the 1/2. 1/2 and square root are the same. And remember, the rules of exponents is when I am multiplying them, I add their power, I add their powers. So it's 2 plus a 1/2. So that gives us x to the 5/2 power. That's what I get when I multiply things together. Alright, now before we find the domain, I'm going to go ahead and plug in when x equals 9. Okay, so when x equals 9, I'm going to get 9 to the 5/2 power. So that is the half, the 2 on the bottom is the root. So I'm going to square root 9, and I get 3, and then I raise it to the 5th power. So 3 to the 5th power is 243. Okay, so for our domain, if I were to graph this, and this one isn't one you're used to seeing, so I do recommend plugging it in your calculator. It looks like this. Starts at 0 and goes up. So that means our domain is when x is greater than or equal to 0, because it's all to the right. And again, in interval notation, that is 0 to infinity. Okay. So that was when I multiplied. So this time we're going to divide. So we're going to take f divided by g of x. So I take function f, and I divide it by function g. And I am going to write it again in fraction, as a fraction. So I'm going to write it as x to the 1/2 power. Because in my properties, my exponent properties, that makes it 2 minus a 1/2, because it's a quotient. So that gives me x to the 3/2 power. Alright, then I'm going to plug in 9 for x. So that gives me 9 to the 3/2 power. Square root of 9 is 3. 3 cubed is 27. Okay, and then we need our domain. So again, if I were to graph this, it looks almost just like the last one, where it goes up, and it's going right forever, so it is x is greater than or equal to 0, which is 0 to infinity. Okay? One thing we need to keep in mind, because this is a quotient, are what values can x not be in the domain. Okay? So, remember, it has to be it can't make that quotient 0. Alright? And x being 0 would make this not work. So, this is when x cannot equal 0. Okay? Alright, number 4. Okay, we're going to first do f times g, so 6x times x to the 3/4. Plug in 16 for x into whatever we got for our function, and then state the domain. So, I'm going to start with f times g. So I have 6x times x to the 3/4. Excuse me. Alright, so again, we're going to multiply these together. So my coefficients would be 6 times 1, which is 6. and add the power. So it's 1 plus 3/4, which makes 7/4. Okay, I'm going to plug in 16 for x. So I get 6 times 16 to the 7/4. Okay, 4th root of 16 is 2, 2 to the 7th, and then you get, 2 to the 7th is 128, times 6 will be 762. And again, plug all that in your calculator if you can't do that in your head. Now for the domain, I need to see what it looks like, so either I'm going to graph it, or, well, yeah, because we haven't studied this, parent function. So graph it on your calculator, and it should look like this. So it's going to the right forever after it hits 0. So our domain is x is greater than or equal to 0, or 0 to infinity. Okay. All right, let's do f divided by g of x. So I'm going to take function f, and I'm going to divide function g. Okay? And we know, because we have an x in the denominator, and the denominator can never be 0, we know that x cannot be 0 in this. Okay? So when I get my answer, and again, that was on the same problem too, up above on number 3. When we do this first, let's go with 6 times x, and it's the first power minus the 3/4, because that's what's on in the denominator, and we get 6 to the x to the 1/4. Okay. Now, because of that denominator, no matter what, we know x cannot equal 0. Okay. I think I stated it with the domain in the last problem, but that goes for the whole problem. Okay. All right. So there's our function, f divided by g of x. Now I'm going to plug in when x is 16. So I have 6 times 16 to the 1/4. So that's the 4th root of 16, which is 2, times 6 is 12. And then for my domain, if I were to graph this, well, 4th root looks like this. Okay? And so it starts at 0 and goes forever right, which is x is greater than or equal to 0, which is 0 to infinity. All right, so now go to the practice and finish it up by doing numbers 8 and 11. This is a short practice, so get these both, get all the problems done and get it submitted into Big Ideas, change it to a PDF, and submit it into Canvas.